Hey everybody, welcome back to World History with Mr. Finn. Today we are finishing up the Age of Exploration and getting to where we have colonies set up in the New World, quote unquote, which are the Americas, and it was called the New World for the Europeans, but as we know, Native Americans had been here and there's a population of people who did live here already before that. And then we're going to bring in Africa into the mix to get us set where we are looking at the 1500s and 1600s and kind of the way they are all going to interact, and I'll explain that to you. But let's first start back with the colonies. If you remember, colonies are a place where people from another area move to and then live, setting up, their own society, usually under the control of their former or mother country. And so these colonies are going to start popping up around in the Americas. We have English colonies, we'll have the Spanish colonies, we have Portuguese colonies. All of these countries from Europe who had come to the Americas start to set up these colonies. And they were good for the mother country because it allowed for a market, meaning the people living here, let's just say in Brazil, are going to purchase goods and stuff from Portugal, and Portugal will make money off of it, like from the whole process of mercantilism, which was what we had just got done talking about. Some of these colonies, a lot of them, are going to be based on plantations. Now, plantations, here's something to understand. Back in this time period, land equaled money. That is how you would show that you were rich, powerful, you would own a lot of land. That is what, it's like, you get the brand new iPhone today, look what I got. If you owned land, that was a status symbol for the people back then. And the more land you owned, you could grow crops on it, you could rent it out, you could do anything you wanted with this land. So the more you had, basically, meant the more money that you would get. And a lot of these places that would grow certain crops, in the colonies you would have plantations that would grow tobacco, you would have plantations that would grow sugar cane, all of these different, crops, I guess you would say, could be grown on large scale estates, and those would be known as plantations. I don't know how our book defines it. Actually, it just says large agricultural estate. So it's think of it as one person owning a lot of land and doing a lot of farming on it, and the more you grow, the more money you make. So for our definition, I guess I will just say exactly what that is. So plantations are large agricultural estates. And so agriculture means that you are going to grow something, and it takes us right to this, right to our dollar sign. You grow something, you grow a lot of it, and you make a lot of money. And that would mean that you were a rich, powerful person here in the colonies, and you would have a pretty good life as that person. What is going to end up happening is where you have a large plantation and you're growing a lot of something, you need labor. You need people to harvest it, grow it, produce everything, because one person owns all of this land. They can't do it all. And what is going to be an unfortunate part of this is going to be it's going to be the advantage taken of the Native Americans to be used as slave labor, and eventually we're going to see Africa and have African slaves be taken from Africa and brought to the Americas. Now, why does that happen? Well, initially, the people that were here from Europe are going to want to use Native Americans and have them almost as slave labor for them to grow whatever they're growing. The problem is the Native Americans didn't have that immunity to certain diseases. So let's go up here with natives. Let's just say, unfortunately, they die from disease. Namely, I know I'm getting a lot up here, smallpox. Smallpox is a disease that Europeans were familiar to and had immunity to it for the most part. But in America, they had never been around this disease, so a lot of them, as we know from the Aztecs, would die off from this disease. And so the Europeans that were trying to use them as slave labor would find that a lot of them would die. Unfortunately, it's not a very good subject. And so the answer that they came up with is going to be to look to other areas. That's where we bring in Africa. So let's go to this triangular trade first and then move over to the Middle Passage. So this triangular trade, basically, I'll draw a little picture. Let's just use this. We'll use an E for Europe. We'll use an A for Africa. Oh, but we have America too. So let's just say, let's make it between North and South America and say Central America. That'll be my CA. And so you can see that you have these three areas. And what started to happen was people from Europe would travel to Africa and they would bring with them certain goods. So it might be like guns and other stuff that could be sold in Africa. And in Africa, they would trade that for slaves. And so in Africa, they would get slaves. And so then they would take the slaves, they would come to the Americas, whether it was South America, North America, or Central America, and they would sell the slaves and then get, let's just call it raw materials. They would get raw materials, but it might be like molasses, it could be tobacco, it could be wood, lumber, it could be whatever the material is, whatever it is. They would get here in America, and then they would take that back to Europe, where they would then sell that to European markets that would use it to make stuff and manufacture things. But triangular trade, you can see that this, I'll just connect to my arrows now, this is why it is called a triangle. Uh-oh. It's not the best triangle, but actually I'm going to make a better triangle just because I'm being particular. But I mean, obviously the name comes from just the shape of the travel and the path that they would take to bring goods here. So the triangular trade was this now relationship between the continent of Europe and Africa and the Americas, in which goods are now starting to go from one to the other to the other. Obviously, by far the worst part of this is going to be the slave aspect, where Africans are going to be taken from their land and sold into slavery. That's not... Today we know that, hey, you can trade goods and manufactured products, you can sell stuff like raw materials, but slaves, that's not a thing. We know that is wrong. During this time period, the people viewed slaves the same as manufactured goods and these raw materials. They viewed them as a commodity, which is something to be bought and sold, which obviously is wrong. We know that, but that's just the way they viewed it at the time. And so that brings us to the Middle Passage. One, we're going to see a huge influx of Africans coming to America. And this is going to really start to bring all of the continents together, where, look at America today, you will see different cultures and skin tones and DNA makeup and all of this stuff in America, because America really becomes a place where everybody's kind of brought in together. And so that is going to be why America looks the way it does today with the people that are here. But let's talk about the Middle Passage really quick. This is a particularly negative thing. The Middle Passage is going to be discuss, the Middle Passage is this part of it. With slaves coming to America, Middle Passage is going to see, we're going to see a massive amount of, I'll even use huge, the term huge, numbers of Africans, unfortunately, are going to die. This is going to be a very terrible part of this triangular trade, this Middle Passage from Africa to America, and it's a very negative aspect of this entire thing. I mean, you would think, hey, people are coming together, this is good, we'll learn from different cultures and bring in new stuff, and that sounds great. However, during this time, that was not the way it was viewed. The idea wasn't the same as we would view it today. These Africans are being stolen from Africa and brought to the Americas to be slaves. And this obviously, slave labor on these plantations was horrid. Huge numbers die. Life expectancy is low. It is going to be a horrible part of American history and world history and history in general. But for us today, the important thing is to understand this. We are to a stop point in world history where we have now seen the rising of what happens in Europe. We have now seen what happens in America. We have now seen Europe and America come together. We have now brought Africa into the mix. We are entering, and this is going to be, and I don't know if I haven't put it up here. Let's just take the year straight, 1600. This is going to be, early U.S. history. If you took American history with me, we are into American history by 1600, talking about these types of things, and these colonies that are popping up, and slave labor being used, the coming together of these areas, which, again, takes us to kind of a point where we can say, all right, we are now to this point where people have come together, and jump back into kind of particulars about these different areas. So, again, the important thing for us today is to understand this. We have now come together with different parts of the globe, the world. The age of exploration has brought the world kind of together, whereas before we talked about certain areas. Now we'll go back to talking about certain areas and what is happening as we make this final run to the end of the year. But for today, let's just turn in the notes. You'll have an assignment next class. I think we're going to do our final current event, actually. We'll do that. But turn this in today for attendance and participation purposes. And that's the news. So on that note, I will see you next class.